We've just got to the end of day 26 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2. We have been listening this afternoon to the live evidence of Walter, who was a hunt saboteur, who was spied on by a number of police officers, most notably Andy Coles, who we'll be hearing from next week, but also Bob Lambert, who we will be hearing from again tomorrow, plus Christine Green and HN 87 John Liscombe and HN 1 Governor Matt Rayner. Joined by Ben, who was watching it as well. What do you make of it?
Oh, it's really good to listen to. It's kind of my era of hunt sabbing, really. It's good to hear people talk about the motivations for being out there in the cold, the wet, and the mud, and about the tactics. It was a bit difficult this afternoon listening to this kind of robotic voice protecting the identity of the witness, and it was also really weird sitting in the room because it felt like there was nobody in there. Yeah. You're in a hearing room. The public gallery was basically empty. Most of the kind of lawyer seats and stuff were basically empty, and there was nobody. You could hear people talking, but you couldn't see anyone's mouths moving. I didn't actually realise that the wall at the far end is a partition, and there were people behind there. So I'm thinking, everyone's remote. There's no one here. Like, why did I come in? So it was quite a weird experience. It's the first time I've experienced that in the hearing, this kind of completely disembodied voice.
It's only the second time it's happened. First time was for Jenny and B, who were both women who were deceived into intimate relationships by Trevor Morris. But both witnesses today had that same setup.
Yeah, I listened to them remotely, and listening to it today, I realised that if you're actually in the public gallery listening to that disembodied voice, it's harder to understand what they're saying than when you're remote. It's not as bad when you're listening to it on the YouTube stream. But of course, there was no YouTube stream today, so.
No, it was a difficult one to follow. I thought Walter was a good witness. I thought he did a good job of explaining the extreme violence of the hunts, about how hunt saboteurs organise to stop them, about the way in which that there was a very definite, he rejected the idea that it was repeatedly referred to in some of the intelligence reports as an ALF activist. He said he had no problem with the Animal Liberation Front, but he just factually had never been involved with them. I mean, this is something we see in a lot of the reporting, where anybody involved in any kind of animal rights is characterised as an ALF activist by the undercover officers. He was asked about Jessica's relationship with Andy Coles. He described Andy Coles as was described at the time by other people as a creep. He says that he was aware that just towards the end of the relationship that it was going on, but it wasn't something that he never really took any interest in himself. He says he feels bad about that now. I think he ended on a very, very, very strong note. He was asked if there's anything else he wanted the inquiry to know, and he just sort of kind of pointed out how. Firstly, actually, about the Crawley and Horsham hunt, and it was was there an understanding from him of why they were so bad? And he said, well, partially, as well as them being incredibly violent, and partially the joint master of the hunt was a close personal friend and confidant of Margaret Thatcher. Right. As I understand it, he had some sort of official role in government at the time, and he kind of questioned, given Margaret Thatcher's very famously took a great interest in the actions of Special Branch, whether he wanted to know whether she had involvement in the selecting of the targeting and the tasking of undercover officers to target the hunt sabs that were sabbing that particular hunt. And then he finished off just by saying, how shocking the fact there was undercover officers in the movement wasn't that shocking. The extent to which they were involved in personal lives was, and he really paid tribute to hunt sabs, all the hunt sabs that he's known, and that they were on the right side of history, and how powerful and resourceful they'd been.
It was a very emotional moment. You could actually hear the emotion in his voice, despite the robot, which I thought was really interesting. He also talked about put into perspective the current use of the term two-tier policing, and put it into the context of actual two-tier policing, and with the complete impunity for the crimes committed by the hunts. and the targeting of the victims by the spy cops. He also talked about attempting to get a job, and at his interview discovering that it was for
Librarian.
in the civil service, and he was asked about his opinion on hunting, and he knew at that moment that the state was blacklisting and intervening. He just got up and walked out. It's like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something which really seemed to have affected a huge number of people who were targeted by undercover police officers.
I've never had a job, and I put it down to blacklisting.
Sadly, I've nearly always had a job. I wish somebody could have blacklisted me at some point. I was a time off, but it's. That was a joke, by the way. I don't mean that at all. I thought overall he really painted a picture of what Brixton Hunt Sabs were like. Inferred about how they were kind of used as a bit of a bogeyman by Hunt Sab groups. Something we heard this morning from Callum as well. I thought that was quite nice. A lot of the photographs of the Sabs, the Brixton Hunt Sabs by Dick Penderyn on Twitter were being shared today, and you kind of really got that impression of something we heard from Callum this morning about kind of how they would make their appearance like intimidating. And there's some classic photography there, which I really recommend people check out. Come on.
I notice we're supposed to be in T2. T2 is supposed to be 1983 to 1993.
The deployment of officers in that period. So if their deployment went later, we're still covering that.
Exactly. So today we heard a lot about stuff going on in 94 and 95. Now I'm in T3 for an incident that took place in the Hunt Sab season of 95-96. Good Easter Hunt Sabs, and I'm actually on the Hunt Saboteurs Association restriction order, but haven't seen any of the evidence for T2, and I haven't seen the T2 bundle. And yet today, and I've said there may well be evidence there that relates to my case. So they're saying, well, you're not T2, you're T3, so you don't get to see any of this. Well, here they are today talking about mass hits on the Good Easter Hunt Sab in 94, which I was
November,
which I was at. I remember it distinctly. It was really, 300 of us that day, and God knows how many cops.
It was just the day before the Criminal Justice Act came into force.
Indeed. And I want to know, and I'm sure there's evidence in there, about how the input from the undercovers deployed into these groups, including my own, how their reports played into the strategies used on these big regional or national hits. And they didn't give it to me. And so I hear about it today for the first time. I didn't get any chance to put any questions to any of the witnesses in T2. I'm quite pissed off.
Yeah, understandably so. I mean, there's yet another example of the inquiry not really putting the core participants at the heart of the process, which is what they need to do if they want to actually get to the truth of genuinely what happens.
Which is another thing that Walter talked about right at the end there, to admitting. He was like, I'm a volunteer. I'm volunteering my time here. And, this has been the delays and the way we've been treated has kind of been shitty. Maybe it'd be good if you did something about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he talked about the stress that it put himself and his partner and his family under, just as a voluntary witness who was only being questioned about, one small area. Spare a thought for those people who have been consistently spied on for, in some cases, over matters of decades, and have been engaging with this inquiry for very long periods of time with the levels of disrespect essentially that the inquiry is showing to so many people who were affected.
You probably didn't hear because you're in the hearing room busy tweeting, but the first person from T3 has received their disclosure and R9 request today with a 6-week deadline, obviously spanning Christmas and New Year, which is exactly what we said we weren't prepared to accept. And that's our Christmas gift from the inquiry.
Yeah, disrespectful. That's the politest way of putting it, really. We've been awaiting this release for quite some time. We've been told by the inquiry that was the disclosure for T3 was imminent for about got to be the best part of a year.
I think it was in July 3rd. We had a meeting with them, and they said then it was 4 to 6 weeks. Right. Yeah.
I mean, certainly, as I've always said to inquiry watchers, if there's any deadlines presented by the inquiry, fully expect them to be, completely ignored by the matter of months and years, not weeks or days. That just seems to be how it goes. Speaking of untimely timings, tomorrow the hearing will start at 9:30. Rather than 10 a.m. Doesn't sound that big a deal, but getting across London at that time of day is as I've discovered is very challenging. Hopefully, I'm sure I will be here in time tomorrow.
Half an hour is going to make a big difference because that's proper rush hour coming across. Yeah. Whereas usually when we arrive here, we've kind of skipped. I mean, I had seats on the tube all the way here this morning.
Oh wow! I mean, I didn't get a seat on the tube. I mean, it's I would say it's standing room only, and sometimes we haven't been allowed to get on the platform because things are running late and it's so full. Even when you're trying to get here for 10 a.m. But I mean, yeah. Anyway, the point is we're starting tomorrow at 9:30. It's because Bob's back. We've got more Bob Lambert, and they know that because the way he answers his questions, it takes so long that they are trying to get as much time out of him as they possibly can.
And one of the witnesses later on in the week, Claire, I think, has been. She's had half her day stolen from her in order to account for Bob being in unacceptably slow. I was joking earlier that we should spike his drink with amphetamines in the morning or something because it's just going to be painful.
It is going to be painful again tomorrow. It's going to be painful again on Wednesday. Yeah, Claire is now only on the afternoon of Wednesday. She may well bleed. Evidence should be recalled for Thursday. Jessica is meant to be giving evidence on Thursday. She might end up now having to give evidence on Friday as well. AJP, I think it's AJP, the cipher, another activist witness, is due to give evidence on Friday. You wonder if they'll end up being on Monday. It's this constant sort of push on. As it currently stands, the Monday and Tuesday next week are free. I'm sure they won't be fairly soon. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that covers it.
Fair play. Thanks for joining us. I'll be doing a Twitter Spaces again this evening. I'll be back again tomorrow 9:30, slightly earlier than usual. Cheers.